Hello and welcome to History Cupboard, the show in which I delve into the dustier corners of history and unearth fascinating people and interesting events from history. Today I'm going to be talking about a mysterious Englishman who rode and fought with the Mongols, and that's what today's thing is about. So in July 1241, Western Europe was cowering in front of the threat, was cowed by the threat of the Mongol invasion. The Mongols had come roaring out of Asia a few years earlier and had destroyed the Russian dukedoms and then beaten the Hungarians at Moe, and then also the Polish knights in the north, and they were now knocking on the door of Austria. Everybody was terrified. They thought that these people were demons and awful, monstrous people, cannibals. They believed all sorts of terrible things about them. At a skirmish outside Vienna, some German knights captured a group of Mongol scouts, and they were astonished to discover that one among their number was an Englishman who'd been riding with these Mongols for 20 years. So they called up an interrogator. They interrogated him, tortured him quite badly, to try and find out the truth of why he was doing this. I think we need to go back a bit and look at who the Mongols were. And for that, we need to look at the steppe. They came from the steppe, which is a huge area of the world. Let me just put up the right thing. You can see the light green on this map. The light green is the steppe, which stretches all the way from China, basically. That's Mongolia up there, all the way over to Hungary here. And this is an area of low rainfall, but not no rainfall. So it's basically not enough rainfall for trees to grow and for there to be forest, which you can see this area, dark green, is forest up here. And it's not dry enough either for it to be desert. So you can see the desert below it. It's this temperate area in between, which means grassland, because grass can grow pretty much anywhere. And when you have grassland, you have herds, you have sheep and goats and camels, and crucially, horses. So steppe peoples are horse people, and they became horse warriors. And you have all sorts of people coming out of this region and usually going west. So you've got Scythians or Scythians, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, who the Greeks, ancient Greeks, wrote about in the 8th century BC. You've got Huns, 5th century, who fought the Romans up here. You've got Avars in the 8th century AD, which are mentioned in some of my Fireborn books. And the latest one is the Mongols. And basically, a guy called Temujin was born in 1162. And at the time, in this area of Mongolia, there were about 20 or 30 different tribes and nations who were all fighting each other. They were Naimans and Tartars and Buryats and lots of different other ones, and one of them was Mongols, a small insignificant tribe, and one guy called Temujin was born into it. And after about I suppose nearly 30 years of struggle, he managed to unite all of the tribes, and he called them all Mongols. They all had to take an oath to him. He said, right, now you're all Mongols. And this was an incredibly, he formed an incredibly efficient army. Horsemen, light cavalry, fast, mobile. They could travel very long distances very quickly. Each Mongol trooper would have maybe 10 horses. So he could jump off one horse when it got tired onto another one and do that 10 times. So they could get very, very far, very fast. This was the key to their strength. They also were quite adaptive. He invented a decimal system of ordering his armies, 10 men to an arban, and then 100 to a yagan, and then 1,000 men as sort of regiments, mingan, it's called a mingan. And it was this decimal system, was very efficient, easy to control, and they conquered China, and they conquered Persia, or the Khwarezmian Empire, so they conquered, and everything in between. Genghis Khan did all this. They had they were very good at psychological warfare. They would go to a city and they would say, surrender or we'll annihilate you. We'll kill every living thing inside your walls. And at the first, the cities would go, no, we're not going to surrender. and they would then take it. So they used siege trains later, which they learned from the Chinese, and they would quite literally kill everybody inside the city. They would, men, women, children, cats, dogs, horses. They'd kill them all, and they made mountains of skulls. They killed millions, and this is very clever, something brutal, but very clever psychologically, because when they went to the next city, they would say, we're going to do the same as the last city, surrender or face annihilation. And that city would invariably surrender because they saw what happened last time around. So when the Mongols turned up in Europe around 1236, and when they were in 1241 outside Vienna, Europe was terrified. They thought that these Mongols were were basically trying to get world domination, and to a certain extent they were, but the Europeans thought that they could do it. Actually, the truth is they couldn't. You'll notice that the steppe stops here, just sort of at Hungary, and this bit, France, Germany, all of this, you can't. It's not good horse. It's not good territory for having light horsemen, so they probably wouldn't have been able to do it. But the Europeans believed they could. And when they found this Englishman who'd been fighting with the Mongols for 20 years, they were absolutely astonished. And as I said before, they interrogated him, they tortured him. This guy called Ivor of Narbonne did the work, and we have the letters that he wrote back to his bishop in Bordeaux, explaining what he'd found out from the Englishman. And the Englishman said that he was in Acre before he was 30. And then he was expelled for gambling from Acre. He lost all his money and his clothes, and he wandered around the Middle East, penniless. He wanted to die. He was miserable condition, and he says that he met the Mongols, and they gave him gifts and presents, and that persuaded him to join their ranks. And he obviously rose very fast through the ranks, because by the time, in the year that they captured him, he had been an ambassador. He'd risen to the rank of ambassador in the Mongol army, because he was seen by Frederick, Duke of Austria, the guy who captured him and who was holding him in Vienna Castle. He was seen by Frederick at the court of King Bela of Hungary in Pest, which is now Budapest, twice in the spring of 1241, making the kind of threats that the Mongols were famous for: surrender or face annihilation. And basically, so this Englishman had started as a penniless guy who lost all his money gambling, and 20 years later he was acting as an ambassador for the Mongols. So it's quite a meteoric rise. The problem is that we don't know very much about who he was, or why he did these things, or what happened to him when he was away. But I'm not the only guy who's interested in this. There's a very interesting book by Gabriel Ronnet called The Tartar Khan's Englishman, and he does a lot of research and explores who this guy might have been. He thinks his name was Robert. He thinks that he was expelled from England around the time of Magna Carta, when the barons were rebelling against King John, bad King John, and that he ended up in Acre because he was a Templar. So he thinks he's called Robert. He thinks he's a Templar. I've called him Robert of Hadlow in my books. I was absolutely intrigued by this guy, Robert of Hadlow. I was trying to work out why he would do that, given that he was a Templar, so a Christian. Why would he side with these people that were the enemies of his own nations and his own religion? Was he in it for the money? It's possible. Was he in it for love? Had he fallen in love with a Mongol woman, perhaps? Or was he on some sort of secret mission? There's a lot of lying that goes on, and there's a lot of inaccuracies and deliberate untruths in his account that he gave to Ivor of Narbonne. So the real truth is we don't actually know. But I've explored some of these ideas in fiction. So I've given a fictional account of what I think was going on in this book, Templar Traitor, which is basically the story of the real Englishman, Robert of Hadlow, but fictionalized and with the gaps filled in by my imagination. So this is Templar Traitor by me, Angus Donald, and that's all for today. Thank you.